Okay, now everything is set. Yay! All right, nice to see everyone. I hope you're all doing well. And, you know my style, just jump in whenever you're ready. You can unmute yourself and we'll read through a couple of things together, and then I'll open it up for questions, and then we can, whoa, let's have to tighten this. Hi. All right. So what we're going to do today is pick up on some of the themes that we were talking about last week when we were talking about some of Israel's coronavirus responses, and we read Danny Gordis's blog. Everyone can hear, right? Everyone can hear? Can I get a thumbs up if you can hear? Thank you. Good day. All right, so the title of today's session, I'm Going Nuts. And I used the word Shpilkes in the title, so we get extra credit for Yiddish. So what became clear to me last week when we were talking is that a lot of us are dealing with a lot right now. I think that one of the things that we're learning from a perspective of spiritual and mental health is that this coronavirus this pandemic has really triggered for a lot of us lots of things, lots of fear and lots of questions about our own mortality and our own health. And then on the other side, it seems like it's been sort of in a country that's already been bifurcated. Now we're bifurcating even further. So you've got some people saying, what does community mean? What does it mean to be part of a country? What does it mean to be part of a society where individual rights are really important to us, where they are fundamental to what it means to be American, versus, on the other hand, sort of this self-righteousness almost that's come across. If you're not doing X, Y, and Z to protect yourself, your loved ones, your family, you're being a selfish narcissist. And so one of the things that I've noticed is the Central Conference of American Rabbis has on Facebook has a group where people share ideas and thoughts, and I'm noticing just an amazing amount, an uncomfortable amount of intolerance for people who won't do things a certain way. Last week, the Union for Reform Judaism decided to shut all 15 of their camps for the summer. And if anyone on this rabbi group even questions the decision, seeing as how the American Camping Association and CDC have not made their formal opinion about summer camps yet, if anyone says anything negative, these other rabbis are saying some of the most just awful things. So it's getting vicious. And then that triggers us even more because we don't know who to believe, we don't know who to listen to, and if we're not confident that we're living in the middle of it right now. We're living in a historic moment right now. We don't have the benefit of hindsight. But one of the things I said last Friday, and I continue to say, is when people say that this is unprecedented times, I argue it's not unprecedented times. There have been terrible, tragic times in world history for as long as history has been around, including pandemics, including times when disease has spread across the globe. If you're a history buff at all, you'll know that one of the greatest moments of anti-Semitism in Jewish history was during the Black Plague, which was blamed on the Jews. If you look at the plagues in the 1800s, there were Jewish communities, and I was looking at an article about a plague that took place in Eastern Europe in the 1800s, around 1850. And so there were these rabbis literally telling congregants not to come to shul, and if they came to shul, they limited the amount of the minyan to only 15 or 20 people, I think. Like very similar guidelines to what we're talking about. So this isn't unprecedented. But in America now, and in the community now, it seems like anytime something happens that we don't know what to do with it, it's unprecedented. Which I think is a little bit strange, because it's not. Human history is very long, and as I always say, there have been, and God forbid, will be tragedies in the future. But what we need right now is each other and our tradition and other ways of thinking about things that will help us. because I think that a lot of us are suffering right now. And most of that is the fear of the unknown. And so we're calling this, the first class we did in March was on fear, living in fear, as opposed to living with fear. And today I thought we would do a little bit of text and a little bit more conversation than we have in the last couple weeks. So I want to start with a really nice article that I read last week by Mitch Albom. A lot of you know Mitch Albom, or you've heard of Mitch Albom. And I'm sure some of you have read this article. It was in the Detroit Free Press where he published it. And it's titled, "Part of the Coronavirus Crisis Will Be How We Tell the Story." So I actually started it in the middle of the article. I want to read to you just a little bit of context, and then we can get some people to read. So here's how he starts. And everyone knows, I think, who Mitch Albom is. So here's what he says. This was written March 15th. I went to the hospital Friday. No, not for that. My appointment had been made months earlier. The doctor offered to do it digitally given the COVID-19 situation, but I preferred to be examined in person rather than contort in front of a computer camera. So I went to the hospital, University of Michigan Medical Center in Ann Arbor. I think, Susie, that makes you happy, yes? Yay. Yeah. Go blue. In the exam room, my doctor greeted me and he said, "Listen, I want to ask you a favor." I could imagine what I had to offer. I couldn't imagine what I had to offer the doctor: a book, an appearance at a kid's sports banquet. Can you tell everyone to stay calm, she requested, to be kind to each other and to not panic. She knew I wrote a column and had a radio program. She politely implored me to spread the message that we will get through this crisis, that there is no reason for the hysteria, that the situation is being portrayed, at least in certain media outlets, as far worse than its reality. People in your position, she said, can make a big difference. I thought about it after I left and realized that she was right. During this crazy time when the world feels like it's hurling forward and screeching to a halt at the same time, people who have columns, microphones, TV cameras should not be above the message of we all need to pull together. We should be part of it. This means balancing the stories we tell, checking the facts, putting them in perspective, recognizing that none of us are experts, and yes, thinking about the emotional effect of what we do, not just slapping every incendiary story, theory, or expert into a headline, because we must be concerned with more than just our bodies in the coming months. We need to protect our minds. Okay, so I love that. And it's sort of the position I've been trying to take. And I said at our very first staff meeting, and clergy meetings also, at the beginning of this, we will not be placing judgment on anyone for the next few weeks. We're going to allow everyone to experience the shock and horror and all of the feelings that come along with that as leaders and facilitate it through a Jewish lens. And that's really been our goal and our vision here at CBI. And as we think that maybe in a couple weeks, we may be able to open up again and have Friday night services here, we were talking today even at our staff meeting about what kind of message we want to communicate. And I said, again, it's a non-judgmental message. And once we know what the guidelines and the criteria are for opening, we will share that with the congregation, and our congregation will make a decision whether they're ready or not. But what I fear is that, fear is an overwhelming emotion, and it is also in some ways, ironically, a very organizing emotion. Fear is what makes us think in terms of black and white. Fear is what often becomes anger and rage, because that's even more organizing. So what I wanted to do today was read a little bit of Mitch Albom's article with you, and spend some time on one of the great Psalms for times like this, and then open it up. So can someone volunteer to continue reading Mitch Albom's article where it says roll back the panic? And you can unmute yourselves. Sorry. You have to unmute yourself if you're going to read. Hang on one second. I think I have, I just have to turn my volume on. Hold on. One moment. Sorry. Why is this here? Why is this here? That's a good question I'm asking myself. Okay, hold on. Okay, this needs to go somewhere else, and this will help me turn on my volume. Now I can hear. Okay, I'm sorry. Bringing it back up. Hold on one sec. From the beginning, let's go here. Can everyone? Okay, who was reading?
I'll read.
Thank you.
As we pull up the covers on our lives, staying inside, eschewing gatherings, skipping work, schools, churches, and parties, we will become more and more dependent on the media to reflect our outside world. Television hours will increase mightily. Internet time will zoom. Good word. People may actually read the newspaper front to back. And if we only do stories about how bad it's getting, how many more new cases have been detected, how unprepared this institution or politician was, how this or that expert is predicting this many deaths and that much contagion, well, we will quickly become a very depressed nation. And a dark national mood is dangerous for society, for the economy.
I'm going to chime in because the figures don't lie.
You want me to keep going?
Yeah, we're getting some background noise from people. If you could please mute if you're not speaking, that would be great.
It will lead to more panic, more anger, more people grabbing every roll of toilet paper for themselves. As much as we need to control the spread of the virus, we need to control the spread of hopelessness. It is every bit as debilitating. 2 weeks ago, I did an interview with a coronavirus patient named Carl Goldstein in Nebraska. At 67, he said the illness wasn't harsh. A high fever at first, then some coughing. But now he felt pretty good and was waiting to be cleared. He is still waiting. He went public with his status, starting an internet blog because he thought, quote, sharing information would be of value to people. Okay, and while many people were indeed receptive, a small group, somebody should mute their phone.
I'm sorry, whoever is on their phone right now could please mute. You know what I think I'll do is I'm having a hard time bringing up my controls. Okay, that's better. Go ahead, Susie.
Okay, and while many people were indeed receptive, a small group was vicious. Goldman said he, quote, started getting death threats, people saying we needed to stay away and not come back to the States. They wanted us to die, unquote. Goldman's wife, Jerry, who did not have the virus, went home to Santa Clarita, California, where they've lived for decades. And even though she had not tested positive, she was shunned in certain places. A local nail parlor wouldn't allow her in. A young man who had been watching her house was fired from his job because he had contact with her. Currently, while her husband recovers in quarantine, she basically goes to work and goes home, unwelcome in parts of her hometown. And this is someone who doesn't have the virus.
Okay, so we'll stop there for a second. So what just anyone who would like to give any response to this idea of, in the first part, that if we only do these stories about how bad it's getting, if we only focus on that, and I don't think he's suggesting that we become this Pollyannish culture, and we only focus on death, and we only focus on contagion, and we only focus on facts that fit our narrative, this dark national mood is dangerous for society, for the economy, for everyone. So any input on that? Anyone want to share, or even share an anecdote or a story of something that you've experienced in the last 6 weeks or 2 months? Just jump in. But make sure you unmute.
I think that the newscasters, the local newscasters, or even the national ones, have tried really hard to end every broadcast with a positive note, be it, the 100th birthday or whatever. But, you know, and even the ones locally that are all working from their houses,
Right.
you know, they've joked around a little bit. They've introduced you to their kids. So I think they're trying to make it seem like, you know, to give everybody hope.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's got to be the same for them. They don't know what it's going to be. They're just reading a paper. They're reading the same, they get the same information we do, quote
Right.
unquote, I
Right.
guess. And, you know.
What do we?
Rabbi,
Oh, go ahead, Marty. Sorry. Thank you, Elaine.
I don't disagree with what has been said. However, I believe that if you compare these stations, whether it's Fox, CNN, the locals, they're actually putting on a show, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. They have a brand to keep up, and they are really putting branding on top of the facts. You know, some people are thrilled at what's going on. Obviously, some people are critical. But this branding through the media and through social media of all kinds, which is really a set of political campaigns in my view, and I've been involved with
A few
hundred of those puppies, is really destructive, in my opinion. It is divisive, but it's what's happening now. It's true that at the end, they all want to, you know, say, "Hail, fellow, well met," or something, whatever that phrase is. In other words, hey, I'm a good guy, you're a good guy, and we're all going to get through this together. That's a wonderful ending, feel-good ending, but I will tell you, inside of this media stuff, all of it, not just TV, but radio, the Facebooks, the social media, and there's a lot of studies on this, is serious branding, which is competition. It's their business. It is really affecting us because it's such a serious issue.
Yeah, so it's gone from the old adage, if it bleeds, it leads, right? Yep. To and I agree with you. I think that almost everything that you see nowadays, especially starting in the primetime hours back east, on any of the major networks, cable networks at least, is entertainment. It's not news. It's opinion. It's not news. But what's happened over the last several years is these opinion shows have been identified as news sources. People who run the shows, who do these 10-minute diatribes at the outset of the show about who did what to who and how wrong they are and how terrible they are portraying themselves as journalists. But they're not journalists. They're entertainers. They are, I remember when I was in Roslyn Heights, New York, and I don't know if some of you saw that movie on HBO a couple weeks ago, Bad Education, which was about the school district in Roslyn. So that's where I worked. Howard Stern was a member of the synagogue. And that was during the time of shock jocks. You know, the people who were successful in syndication, radio hosts who were successful, like Don Imus, Howard Stern, were called shock jocks. And the worse, more crazy their shows were, the higher their ratings were. And a lot of the ratings showed that the people who hated them watched longer than the people who liked them because they wanted to hear what they were going to say next and how far they were going to go. Well, now shock jocks, the equivalent of a shock jock is on CNN, on Fox News, on MSNBC. But the American people, especially people who grew up with the greats, real news anchors who were reporting the news, even if it had a lean to it, a bias to it one way or the other. People are identifying these as journalists. And as Jews, we believe very much in that concept of the collective unconscious, which is to say that we're all connected. We're connected in Judaism, at least, not using that psychological term, that we're connected by this energy. And that energy can become turbulent when the culture, in this case the media culture, takes a narrative and then takes it to the extreme. It makes us more extreme. And for Jews, it's been like that for thousands of years. You know, there were kings of Israel who were not great kings. And so the prophet would sweep in and tell everyone to get their act together because they weren't behaving well, and it always started at the top. So I agree with what Elaine is saying is that there is some attempt at saying, here's our happy story or here's our feel-good story at the end. But you can say we're all in this together until you're blue in the face. But I think it's very clear we're not all in this together right now. And that's unfortunate.
I wanted to say that I was a former journalist, and so I normally read a lot of news, and it was really getting to me. And at some point, I started reading more, but every day I have Alexa at 5:15 play Mayor Garcetti on KNX. And for those who don't know, despite the name, he's Jewish, and he's the mayor of LA. And he's showing how this should be handled. He gives the facts and figures with a lot of creative ways that he's helping save the city. And then he gives the talk that we should all be having right now.
Right.
The real leadership talk, where it is comforting.
Yeah.
And for example, what he's doing, and this is why they've handled it so well, they've been taking people off the streets. They first went on and got them masks, got them tested. The hotel industry is hurting. So the city contracted with the hotel industry to put the homeless people in. Then he separated the ones who were our age and those showing symptoms from those who weren't. The restaurant industry is hurting. So the city contracted with the restaurant industry to provide food for those people and provide food for older people. Yeah. And there's been no stone left unturned. And unlike here, and one way I'm keeping my sanity, by the way, is I go on the Department of Health Services website every day at around 9 o'clock in the morning. They have the new figures. And I've charted it out since the beginning.
Oh my.
And what I'm seeing, and if people read this, in all due respect, Rabbi, when you said that you were considering opening up again, I urge you to look at the figures, because even though more people are being tested, and even though there's still really not much of a chance you could get it, what's happening is the chances of getting it keep rising, and the chances of dying from it keep rising. Mm-hmm. I mean, yesterday we did have, the first time 9 days ago, we had 0 deaths in Arizona. The next day we had 18, where before we weren't getting that many deaths. We were getting maybe 7 to 10. So kind of, it was just a blip. Yesterday, everybody got excited. Oh, things are opening up again. There were 0 deaths. But today there were 33. So the number keeps going up. And in 15 days, the number of deaths have doubled. Mm-hmm. And I can understand because I nearly died in 96 a few times. And it took a good year and a half for me to even talk about it or have the energy to talk about it. And I understand what it's like to be caught in this and be frustrated. Yeah. But the thing is, it's not helping anybody to say, I'm really tired, and the chances of me personally not getting that sick are pretty small. So, let's open everything up. Right. Because, I want to say that one thing that and this isn't directed necessarily to you, but thank you so much for sharing what you shared. I think that there is still, for all of us, a desire to have and you talked about Mayor Garcetti, and there are other mayors and governors. I think Doug Ducey's, quite frankly, personally been pragmatic. I think that there is this balance that we're struggling with. And the balance goes back to what I was talking about. When we're getting information from, whether it's the website for the CDC or for the state, one of our members is Rebecca Sonnenschein, who is not just a doctor, but the director of Maricopa County Health Department. So she is the director of the 4th largest metropolitan health department in the country. So she's someone who I've communicated with as well. I think that the information for me that has been most
satisfactory is that which is coming from scientists and not the scientists who are on television. Because and Marty, I want to go back to your point for a second. Because even the scientists who are on television, that is to say people, and I'll point one out, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, who's on CNN, I'm sure is a phenomenal doctor. I'm sure of it. But there is an agenda when you put makeup on and you get dressed up and you go on a news program and you're paid by the news channel. Your agenda changes. And if it bleeds, it leads. And what Mitch Albom is saying in the beginning part, I just want to repeat it because it's not on the screen. I just want to say what he said. When people see that as the gospel, or hear that, oh, he's a doctor, he's a neurologist, or a neurosurgeon, neurosurgeons are pretty high up there on the food chain, I don't mind saying. But I want to just repeat what Mitch Albom said. He said that we should be part of this story and how we tell the story. So, Wendy, when you tell your story, that means a lot to me because I know you, I have a relationship with you. It means a lot more to me than it does listening to someone on one of the news channels, right? He says this means balancing the stories we tell, checking facts, as you've been doing, putting them in perspective, recognizing, which for those of us who have had pre-existing health issues is hard to do, put it in perspective. But on the other hand, recognizing that none of us are experts, and yes, thinking about the emotional effect of what we do, not just slapping every incendiary story, theory, or expert into a headline, and then going back to what this man did from Nebraska, who was quarantined at 67 years old. He was writing this article or blog or whatever it was that for him, it wasn't that bad. The effects, the impact of the coronavirus wasn't that bad. He didn't, get that sick, that he felt pretty good, was waiting to be cleared, and then got attacked for it. And that culture could be fed. It could be that culture is being fed by a news cycle and stories, and a lot of which now we know for sure on Facebook, for example, is not real, right. That is feeding the narrative. I want to see if there are other people who wanted to jump in.
I do. I would like to talk.
Please.
I think that a lot of the fear comes from lack of information, and the information that we're getting is often contradictory. Somebody comes on TV and says, this is happening, and then 10 minutes later somebody says, well, no, that's not actually happening.
Right.
A lot of the problem is just the lack of solid information.
And consistent.
It's very
Hang on
scary when you're trying to really figure out what's going on. There are people telling the truth, but it's very hard to sift through all the noise to find out.
And it's hard to be able to tell the truth, quote unquote, when the story is happening. In other words,
right.
When I give you information and I don't say, and I'll say this as a rabbi, if someone asks me a question about death and dying, let's say, I usually start by saying the information is based on a vast array of sources. In other words, there's no one quick, easy answer. And I don't see, Terry, that humility when we listen to, especially on the news, when we listen to experts. They're giving, in some cases, very myopic interpretations. In some cases, very harsh interpretations and scary interpretations of data. But I don't see a lot of humility where people it's easy for them to admit, we don't know what it's going to look like in a year from now, let alone a month from now. Look at the last 6 weeks, how much the story has changed.
It's so political.
That's
It's really political. It's, we should all be getting the information that Wendy is getting, but it's not easy. We don't know how to do that.
well, and it's easier for you because you live with someone who's got daily But no, I hear what you're saying. That's why I've enjoyed the couple times that I've reached out to Rebecca, because I feel like I certainly am not responsible for the fourth largest county in the country for their health. And I can't imagine how many hours someone like her is working right now, or your husband is working right now. Jeff, go ahead.
The information.
Hang on, one at a time. We're going to listen to Jeff.
Yeah. The information changes. They're learning more as they go along. They're dealing with something that we've never dealt with before. Not as a pandemic, but a disease that we've never dealt with before. It reacts differently. And in most cases, when Susie is probably very much involved with this.
Sure.
When they go to test drugs, it's a long process. And they have to test a lot of people before they know whether it's safe or not. So even using past history as in order to draw a conclusion of what's going to be doesn't work, because this isn't working the way it's worked before. In fact, I heard on one of the newscasts last night, they were giving the statistic that this past year was one of the worst death rates from influenza in recent history. And how much of it was influenza and how much of it was the coronavirus. And when somebody dies, how do you classify it? If they've had a heart condition, was it the heart? Was it the coronavirus? Was it influenza? It's going to take a long time before they get the data put together and analyzed correctly.
Yeah.
Even if you eliminate the people who are just making political statements, and you take the people who have been involved with this and who are making judgments,
So I just want to thank you.
Work out that fast.
I want to pivot. I want to pivot though, because everything that we've talked about, I think we're exemplifying. We are showing what this uncertainty does to us, and what it does to us is it makes us rely on both instinct and experience, but also on the news. And what I'm trying to do, or what I hope to do today, is give us the opportunity to get out of that world and to look from our lens in our spiritual well-being, from a perspective of our spiritual well-being, of how we're going to cope with this, how we're going to get through with it, and make ourselves less anxious. And one of those things we're going to get to in a second, and we're going to read a little bit more of Mitch Albom, is we're going to read King David's Psalm, where I think it's not the antidote, but there are some other antidotes that are non-medical interventions that I think will at least give us peace of mind, which is what we all desperately need. I could tell all of you, stop watching the news, right? And I bet you that would help a lot with your anxiety levels. And I'm sure some of you know people who have had COVID or died from COVID. I can tell you, knockwood, poo-poo-poo, Kanahara, our congregation has been okay so far. And thank God. But let's go back to Mitch Albom. This is now, we've talked about all the things that are scary, and they are. The statistics and the news. And now let's read what he has to say about this idea of balancing the fear. How do we balance all of that stuff that we're talking about? So does someone want to read? Carol Seibert. She had her hand up first.
Okay, balance the fear. I share that story to show how misinformation can lead to fear and how fear can lead to cruelty. And I return to the idea that we in the media, particularly editors and producers who decide which stories go where, need to think as part of the American society, not a detached, unfeeling entity. This means, for example, if we are going to blast headlines every day of how many new cases of COVID-19 have been discovered, we should put in equal display how many people have recovered from the virus and will be fine. That number globally is around 70,000. Did you know that? It's a critical piece of information. But how many recovered people have you seen interviewed? Likewise, we read plenty of critical stories of how unprepared we were or who fell down on the job, but there are people working on testing, distribution, vaccines, and emergency shelters.
Yeah, so I think that that's an excellent point. It's where is the balance going to come from? I sent out something on Facebook yesterday about AIPAC, asking people to thank, if they wanted to thank their congressman for passing some more sanctions on Iranian, not sanctions, but more legislation to prevent Iran from getting more weapons of destruction. And someone said, why are you posting to me offline? Why are you posting this during this pandemic? And I'm like, because the world is still going on.
Absolutely.
I mean, the rest of the world still goes on. We're still deciding what to do about camp this summer. And if you could see what some of my colleagues have said, that we're even considering such a thing. I mean, there has to be balance, right? There has to be, as he says, some way of saying, well, people are also recovering from it. People are also getting through it. Some people are, as we have heard a lot, asymptomatic or have mild symptoms. Children, there are studies coming out a lot of studies that are testing the why the kids aren't getting it so badly, and a lot of it has to do with their systems and their wiring and receptors that they have or don't have. But I think what he's saying here is, it's a critical piece of information who's surviving, who's getting to the other side, and yeah, we were unprepared. On the other hand, look at what we've done in 6 weeks, 8 weeks, as far as testing goes, as far as the increase in patient care and so on and so forth. Okay, let's continue. Who wants to read this? I'm going to skip to this slide right here. Elaine. Oh, Marty. You got it, Marty.
Starting with this, isn't the time
Yes,
to be
please.
self-righteous, a false expert or know-it-all alarmist. How we handle ourselves in the next months will determine what our nation looks like in the next few years. The dangers of the virus should never be ignored, but neither should the hopelessness of surviving.
Hopefulness.
Hopefulness of surviving.
Important word.
I have right. Thank you. Whatever. I have learned through the decades writing about this project that most people can't really envision death, but they react mightily to the threat of it. Fear and depression quickly rise, anger, isolation, doing and saying things that they never did before. We who shape this oncoming narrative will be largely responsible for that, like it or not. I guess this is why my doctor, in her vision, asks me to urge calm, compassion, reaching out instead of pulling in. Find the negative may be the media's inclination, finding the negative, but finding the positive is now our obligation. We are citizens and humans before we are reporters and commentators, Wendy, and my doctor's favor should be granted by all of us for all our sakes.
Yes.
So this summarized by saying what my dad said, and he got this biblically somehow. When the great scorer goes to write against your name, it's not whether you win or lose, but how you play the game.
Nice.
Don't you think some of this is that we're used to making decisions that affect only us? And now we're told and explained why that the decisions we're making can have far-reaching effects.
Yes.
And personally, from where I'm standing, and I don't mean to be super critical because we all have our own backgrounds and all this, but as someone who has conditions that I've chronic illnesses, and I'm used to having to deal with being inside many times. I mean, this is like, because I had the flu so badly, this is going to be the end of my 5th month with only maybe going out 6 times. And so I've had to deal with this. And there are times where you have to accept what you simply can't change. And you do it for the greater good. And you say, okay, there's going to be a time, hopefully a year and a half, hopefully that second wave they're talking about now won't be as bad. But we really can make it through it. And if we settle down, because we all know, we all teach our kids about delayed gratification. Here's a really shining example of delayed gratification. Because we have gotten under the curve, in Arizona. First it was supposed to be, we were supposed to hit the pinnacle on April 15th, then it was April 25th. Now it's the middle of May to the middle of June, because we haven't even reached it yet.
So Wendy, there's a couple people who have their hands raised. I hear where you're going though, and I understand this is a very complex issue. And patience is going to, to take all of a sudden take a country that's not very good at delayed gratification and say, do it now. That's a very hard thing to learn for people. Steve Goldson, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.
I go back to the lens, what lens we're looking through. I was really surprised on Channel 5 on the morning show. They had a camp director from a big group of camps up in the Northeast. And by the way, I shared this with our camp director. And his lens was really interesting because you mentioned the camp.
Yeah.
And here's one thing he said. So you're not going to send your kids to camp. What are you going to do with them this summer?
Right.
What are you going to do with them? What are they going to do with them? How exposed will they be? Won't they be better off in the open air swimming in a chlorinated pool than what?
Right.
And so, we're in this medical thing where we're all going to be safe because we can cocoon.
Right.
But that's not true at all. And there's a 15-year-old kid in the open air in Prescott have the same problem as Judy and me going to the AMC movie
right
in July.
Right.
I could go on and on, but I'm not. But you can see where I'm going. We have to look at the lens, and then we have to use what's difficult for many people. It's called common sense.
And Steve, to follow up on that, and then Susie, we're gonna hear from Susie next. I desperately want to open camp. We're not going to open camp if the people who we have assembled, who are all respectable, knowledgeable doctors and statisticians and infectious disease doctors, tell us not to. I want to do it mostly because these kids, the kids who are fortunate enough to go to camp, and we're doing this with our preschool as well, have to get out of their houses at some point. The longer we go, the longer it's going to take. It was very easy to dismantle the economy. It's going to be very hard to reassemble it, and that goes for any developmentally appropriate programming, especially for kids who we have enough information at this point, not all of it, that we have learned do not have the same reaction to this disease as, of course, people with comorbidities. It's going to be hard if we open camp to tell parents of kids who are insulin-dependent diabetics and or whatever the criteria are that those kids should not come. That's going to be hard, and it's going to be heartbreaking. But nonetheless, I'm committed to waiting for some more pieces of guidance. Susie.
I'll try to be quick because
Thanks.
I know Jamie's hand is up as well.
Yeah.
3 things. One is
Maybe about 10 minutes.
The mayor of LA is doing a phenomenal job because he's opened up testing to everybody in the city, and that way he's going to know who has no symptoms and has the disease, and they can do contact tracing and understand the disease. That's the first thing. Second of all, I don't agree with you. We've come a long way in 6 weeks. I'd say, look where we are in 6 weeks, and I think it's awful, personally, when I look at the numbers. And third, there are some wonderful things going on right now. There are performers putting on free things. There's museums. There's music. And I have a list of our Friday nighters, and people have been sending me wonderful, funny videos, and I've been sending them out to everybody on my list at least once a day, sometimes 3 times a day, just to make people happy.
And I, Susie, want to say amen. Just to clarify, I wasn't saying that where we came, the 0 to wherever we are right now, the 0 was unacceptable. The fact that people have been talking about this for decades and we didn't have a system set up, I think is reprehensible, and I think we have to do something about that in the big picture. In the short term, I agree with you. I feel closer to our congregation. I feel closer to our members. I feel closer to my colleagues and my staff. I mean, what we're doing together, and you guys have been very gracious in your emails and stuff. I'm so grateful for it. And I agree with you. I watch Jimmy Kimmel and all those guys every night, and they're hilarious, but all the videos that are being shared are also equally hilarious. Jeff and Janie, we're going to go a couple minutes over because I want to get to the psalm, because I want to show you how Jews respond to anxiety and fear. And I think that's kind of important. I probably should have done the psalm first and not had this conversation first. But so what? We're having fun, and it's great being together. I don't know if it was Janie or Jeff, but you had your hand up. The Kuznetskis.
What we have our hand up for?
You had your hand up? Did you have something?
I've got lots of things, but not to say.
Oh, I'll lower your hand for you then. Okay.
Well, thank you.
Now, we're going to look at Psalm 91. Now we're going to get to the punchline finally with, again, we'll go over a few minutes. Psalm 91, all the Psalms written by King David 3,000 years ago. And one of the things I think that binds us together, however we decide to translate it is up to each one of us, is God, faith. This idea that, as I said at the very beginning, God doesn't create diseases without the cure. And we have to become the cure. And that's a big, loaded sort of statement, but nonetheless, that's how Jews believe. And the one thing that we believe is we're part of something that is much, much, much larger and much, much more mysterious and much more, there are many more question marks than there are definitive statements. And so King David knows this. And so he writes this psalm, Psalm 91, written in the first verses, you can see, to the one who dwells on in the shelter of the Most High. I'm going to read a couple commentaries, and then I want to hear someone read these beautiful words. So this psalm is one of a number of psalms that has no superscription. In other words, it doesn't say, a lot of psalms start, Mizmor Shir, here is a song of David, or a song of for this or that or the other thing, or a song of hallelujah. This one goes right into the words. It also does not belong to any obvious cultic genre of psalms. It doesn't fit in. The one right after this is Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbat, a song for the Sabbath day that we sing on Shabbat. So it doesn't necessarily fit with what comes after it and before it. The Israeli scholar Yair Hoffman, noting its eloquent expression of God's unflagging providential protection, has interestingly characterized this poem as an amulet psalm. In other words, this is the psalm, if after today's lunch and learn you want to go look up, or I can send you a copy of it in Hebrew or in English, this is the one you're supposed to fold up and put in your wallet and carry around with you. It's the amulet psalm. That reminds us of God's guarding power. So what we believe, Jews, whether we're superstitious or not, but it helps if we're superstitious, Eastern European Jews like me, we believe in things like amulets. We believe in things that help to shoo away the Marasayan, the evil eye. And this is the psalm that one is to carry with them. Again, I don't have a copy in my wallet. I'm superstitious, but not that bad. But it's almost as important as the little cloth you put in your mezuzah. So if anyone wants a little extra protection, this is something that you keep on you. Who would like to read the first few verses here of Psalm 91 from King David?
I will.
Thank you. Yeah, Elaine, it's your turn.
Okay. O you who dwell in the shelter of the Most High and abide in the protection of Shaddai. I say of Adonai, my refuge and stronghold, my God, in whom I trust, that God will save you from the fowler's trap, from the destructive plague. God will cover you with God's pinions. You will find refuge under God's wings.
So let's stop there for 1 second. God will save you from the fowler's trap, from the destructive plague. This is my visceral at times, and I say no, they're not. King David, 3,000 years ago, understands what plagues are. Exodus understands what plagues, we'll call them pandemics, plagues, whatever you want to call them. What he's saying here is, it's not, I believe in God and therefore I won't get the plague. Okay, I want to make that clear. It's God's salvation, ultimate salvation, keeps us from harm. But that doesn't mean that harm does not exist. So we have to be, we have to tolerate ambiguities. And that is one of the main ambiguities here. God will cover you with God's pinions. You will find refuge under God's wings, which probably reminds us of Hashkivenu, which we sing at the night, right? Mama bears protect their kids, but it doesn't mean that kids don't get themselves into trouble. Okay? So keep reading, please.
God's fidelity is an encircling shield. You need not fear the terror by night or the arrow that flies by day, the plague that stalks in the darkness, or the scourge that ravishes at noon. 1,000 may fall at your right, but it shall not reach you.
Okay. So one other commentary, and then I want to open up for questions. In all likelihood, it says on this idea, this is a hard thing to think about. Don't fear the terror by night or the arrow that flies by day, this plague that stalks in the darkness or the scourge that ravages at noon. 1,000 may fall at your right, but it shall not reach you. Now, David is messaging here something that's hard for some of us to recognize, which is, but it goes back to Mitch Albom saying, let's think about the ones who are recovered. Let's think about the ones who are not getting it. Also, in this balancing act that we're doing. Here's the commentary. In all likelihood, the setting evoked is a raging epidemic in which vast numbers of people all around are fatally stricken. So we are in unprecedented times if we look at King David's words. So he's writing this at a time when there is an epidemic with vast numbers of people dying in Israel at this time 3,000 years ago. The image of martial danger, however, introduced by this flying arrow in verse 5 and the shield in verse 4, is superimposed on the image of danger from the plague, life imagined as a battlefield fraught with dangers. That means that the plague is one of many things that could be dangerous or deadly. And I think that's an incredibly important perspective right now. Yes, it's getting all the attention, and yes, it's on the news, but perspective is everything here. What King David is saying is, the plague isn't stopping the arrows from flying, right? Like I said yesterday, the plague isn't stopping the rabbi from sending out the AIPAC announcement. The world continues to go on. There are many things that are dangerous. There are many dangers. And so what he says is, when he says it will not reach you, in this line after of the 1,000, the third member of this line is not semantically parallel, but instead marks a strong contrast. You will remain untouched over against all those who fall, which is to say, you still have a chance, if with faith and with understanding that, and with perspective and with balance, that because bad things happen doesn't mean that they are going to necessarily happen to you.
Fair enough.
Does that make sense?
Sure.
And so that's what this first part of the psalm is about, is bad stuff exists. Bad stuff happens. And God is watching over and, like a mama bird, trying to keep us under the wings to protect us. But that doesn't mean that the bad things stop happening. They exist. And there are other things other than COVID-19 that are harmful day in and day out. And have that perspective. Even though this seems to be the one thing that we are unbelievably focused on. And maybe that will help our stress. Okay, next part. Hold on. That's oversimplified, but verse 9, who wants to read? And I know we're over time, so if people need to leave, by all means. Who wants to read verse 9?
I will.
Thank you, Marty.
Because you took Adonai, a refuge, the Most High, as your haven, no harm will befall you, no disease touch your tent, for God will go, the angels, to guard you wherever you go. I'll go on if you want. Or
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Because he is devoted to me, I will deliver him. I will keep him safe, for he knows my name. When he calls on me, I will answer him. I will be with him in distress. I will rescue him and make him honored. I will let him live to a ripe old age and show him my salvation.
So let's really quickly get some responses to this psalm. And don't talk statistics, don't talk medicine or science. Just if you look for your best spiritual version of yourself, your innermost Jew, and tell me, what does this psalm present for us? No, go ahead, one at a time. Lori?
God is our source of healing and hope. We seek God's nearness and gain strength.
Nice. Sometimes it's nice to just, as they say in the other co-religions, let go and let God. That there are some times that we let things run their course, but life is a risk. Life is filled with traps and arrows and all kinds of things that could hurt us or harm us or be fatal. But putting your trust in something bigger, or as you said, like your faith in something bigger, can give you strength. Marty, hold on. Can give you strength. Okay, Marty, what were you going to say?
That is so fundamental to living in the world, the corporate world, the education world, the religious world, the kids world, and that is, if you believe in something bigger than yourself, larger than yourself, then you're comforted to know that you can do things and do more things. And to me, that's a big issue, big item, and really important. It's fundamental as almost anything else in the religion, let alone life. Yeah.
We read about that last week when I was talking about the golden rule, and I said, don't forget the golden rule, love your neighbor as yourself, is preceded by, also, it would help if you don't hate. So this balance of confidence, belief. Look, we get triggered. I think it's helpful to acknowledge when we get scared what's getting triggered for us, and that's obviously between you and your therapist or your spouse, whoever you talk about these things with. But I think what David is saying is that all of those things are acceptable, normal, the arrows flying, but no harm will befall you, no disease touch your tent, for God will order the angels to guard you wherever you go, is a useful, even for our modern scientific brains and our rationalistic brains. You know, for a Reform rabbi to presenting this comment must be crazy, right? It's not. I actually believe this. I don't believe that no harm will ever befall me because it exists, right? But I do believe this idea that there are ministering angels, that there are things, elements. The more, as you said, Marty, the more we create positivity, not in that Pollyannish way, but the idea is in Judaism, the amulet is mitzvot. The amulet is leading a good life. The amulet is seeking truth and justice and doing it, right? That's what gives us more spiritual confidence. And the correlation between the two, I think, is incredible, as you said, is fundamental. Anyone else want to say something?
I think maybe the amulet might be that we keep going on.
Fair enough. In your mindset, you mean? Sam? Give me a little bit more about keep going on.
And no matter what happens, no matter what hardships we face, whether it affects us or not, I've been there,
You live it.
You keep living. You got to keep going. Otherwise, you're going to put your head in the sand and just stay there.
Sam, one of the things that's most courageous about you is what you do every day. I think you're a man of exceptional courage because, you could have turned your back on all of this, walked away, and been done. But you didn't. You re-engaged and you stood like Jacob. You became a man you became a wrestler.
Yeah, I kind of thought of that myself, that my name should have been Israel.
We can always change it.
Because I'm wrestling with I still wrestle with God.
Absolutely.
Prayer is a little bit different for me. I know the words, but what do they actually mean to me? Except that my dog is stretching my arm. There's something more than just prayer. I think go to the temple, I think, just to be there rather than to say words.
Yeah.
And of course, the fact that my granddaughter comes with me and that it's a bonding time for us.
Yeah.
That also is spiritual, more than the words, more than a belief in. I don't know what my belief is at this point, but I'm there, and part of it is being there. Part of it is, I know the words. I don't need the book to say, and the words are my own. I still pray, but I don't know what, how I'm handling it.
Yeah. And that's what that's what King David is saying. When you call on God, God will answer. God's always ready. God is with you in the distress. God rescues you and makes you honored. God lets you live to a ripe old age and so shows salvation, whether you struggle with it or not. I love this idea, I will be with him in distress. It's very hard for Jews, rationalistic, so on and so forth. We see distress as a punishment, or we see distress as a reason not to believe in God. But you just said it yourself. It's really a reason to struggle with God. It's a reason to wrestle with it, to say, I don't even know what I believe. But the act of doing that and having that conversation is in and of itself the antidote, is the refuge. And so I want to ask everyone to go to their Bibles and take Psalm 91. If you're feeling anxious and you're feeling depressed and you're feeling like this is never going to get better, stop watching the news so much, because it's not news, it's entertainment. Not all of it. And B, stop watching primetime programs. And B, print this psalm and read it with you. Every time you're feeling like you're feeling helpless, read it. And remember, there is something bigger than us, watching over us. And as Elie Wiesel said, and I think we should give Elie Wiesel some credit for saying this, when he said God was in the camps with us, what he meant to say, and I've heard him speak about it and he's written about it, is this idea that God was punishing us, or this idea that this was some divine retribution. No, God was suffering along with us. And I think God is very much suffering along with us now. But I think what will get us through it is to remember that we will get through it, that we will get to the other side.
Rabbi?
Yes.
I don't remember when the story is told. It might be a Yom Kippur story about the man that's having a really terrible time, and he's got this footprint through the sand, and he says to God, I don't understand. I had all these troubles, and you weren't there. And God said, of course I was there. I was carrying you. That's why there's only one set of footprints. I shortened it up, but you probably can figure out what I'm trying to remember. Back in New Jersey, I think that was something they used around
I know what you're talking about. The idea of God walks with us,
right? And
you can't see the footprints necessarily, but the idea that God carries us through difficult, painful, tragic times. Right, a couple months ago, after my dad died, so many people were saying that they were sorry they couldn't come to Shiva, and how that must have been terrible. And there were some aspects of it that were terrible. But in that, I wasn't able to worship with the entire congregation. That was hard. But then we started doing this stuff, this online stuff, and I got to see everyone's punams, and I realized that was the healing, that was the comfort. People take it different ways. For me, it wasn't about, everyone showing up for a particular service. It was everyone showing up, period.
Oh, and I want to thank you for Rabbi Volpe. I watched his stuff from
that was good.
It was really good. Especially the part about treat your neighbor as yourself. He says, now listen, I don't like mushrooms, so if you like them, don't make them for me. I'll make them for you.
Right. All right, guys. Thanks so much for joining us again. We're going to keep Lunch and Learn going throughout May. I think Cantor's going to be up next week. And we will keep you posted about, when we're going to be reopening and what that's going to look like so that everyone can feel as safe as possible. And if people choose not to, to choose to wait a little bit longer, which is totally fine, we have live stream every week. So that part's not going to change. But we'll wait and see what happens and wait for all of it.
It's always on Tuesday, is that correct?
Yeah, Tuesday at noon. Cantor's got book club tonight for anyone who wants to join book club. I'm sorry, Rabbi Mason Barkin's got book club tonight. I think that's at 7 o'clock, yes? 7. And then Cantor's got his class on Thursday. And we've got the whole May schedule's was done last week, but it's up on the website, so you can see lots of things coming up.
Thanks a lot, Rabbi.
Thanks, you guys. It's always great seeing you and being with you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're so welcome.
Yasher Koach.
Baruch Tieh, thank you. I'll see you guys soon.
All right.
Bye-bye.